This is probably the most heartbreaking case I've ever covered on this page.
In March of 1944, the bodies of 2 young girls were found with fractured skulls in Alcalu, South Carolina. As this was the 1940s, the town was racially segregated, but these 2 white girls were found dead on the black side of town. Suspicion immediately fell on 14-year-old George Stinney, who was seen talking to the girls the day before their discovery, along with his sister. The girls had supposedly visited the home of a wealthy white family after speaking to George, but police didn't follow up on this lead. Neither his parents or an attorney were present during the interrogation, and the police officers who interrogated him withheld food from him. They bribed him with food to confess. No confession statement signed by George exists. The jury deliberated for less than 10 minutes, and George was sentenced to death by electric chair. He had to use a Bible as a booster seat because he was too small. His face mask, which was too large for him, fell off during the execution, revealing he was crying when he died. In 2014, he was declared innocent. I ran out of time, so pause here to read the rest of the story, I'm sorry.
How is it possible that an international celebrity can be murdered in the streets in broad daylight?
In 1997, 27-year-old Andrew Cunanan's wealthy lover had just cut him off, and he was sent in a downward spiral. He went on a killing spree, starting with a propane salesman who was found rolled up in a rug in late April. 3 other victims followed in the upcoming months until Andrew would make his most infamous kill. At 8:45 in the morning on July 15th, 50-year-old fashion designer Gianni Versace was heading home after taking his usual morning walk near Miami Beach. He was approached by Andrew, who shot him twice point blank, and he was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. After a massive manhunt, Andrew was found 8 days later, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. I got all of my sources and pictures for this video from Crime Door, which lets you virtually walk through hundreds of true crime cases, explore maps, videos, podcasts, documentaries, and...
Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 1. On July 18, 1984, James gathered a small arsenal of weapons. His wife asked him where he was going. He replied, "I'm going to hunt humans." He had been at the same McDonald's earlier that day with his wife and children. This time, James was returning alone with a semi-automatic rifle, a semi-automatic pistol, and a 12-gauge pump shotgun. He told his family, "Goodbye, I won't be back." 45 people were inside the McDonald's restaurant in San Isidro, California. James entered the building and first shot a 22-year-old woman named Kane below her left eye. She died minutes later. He then shot a 16-year-old employee, John Arnold, in the chest and arm. James yelled, quote, "Everybody get on the ground." He then called everyone in the restaurant, quote, "dirty swine Vietnam assholes," and claimed that he had, quote, "killed 1,000 and intended to, quote, kill 1,000 more. After James's racist rant, 25-year-old Victor Rivera tried persuading James not to shoot anyone else. James responded by shooting Victor 14 times and repeatedly shouting, "Shut up," as Rivera wailed in pain. Customers ducked under tables and crowded together, seeking protection from the crazed gunman. That's when James turned his attention towards 6 women and children huddled together. Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 2. That's when James turned his attention to 6 women and children huddled together. He shot 19-year-old Maria in the chest. He then fatally shot 9-year-old Claudia in the stomach, cheek, thigh, hip, leg, chest, back, armpit, and head with his Uzi. He wounded Claudia's 15-year-old sister and shot 11-year-old Aurora with his shotgun. That's when her pregnant aunt, 18-year-old Jackie Reyes, shielded her niece. James shot Jackie 48 times. Jackie's son, 8-month-old Carlos, sat up and cried beside his dead mother's body. James shouted at the baby and then killed him with a single shot to the center of his back. James then killed a truck driver, 62-year-old Lawrence, right before he targeted another family near the play area. The mother, Blythe, was shielding their 11-year-old son, Mateo. In the booth across from them was her husband, Ronald, shielding their son's 12-year-old friend, Keith. Ronald and Keith were shot numerous times but survived. Ronald's wife and son were less fortunate, dying of several shots to the head. 3 11-year-old boys, oblivious to the shooting, rode their bikes into the west side of the parking lot, ready to order ice cream sundaes. Someone yelled at them across from the street, so they hesitated. But it was too late. James saw them and shot the 3 boys with his Uzi and shotgun. Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the McDonald's Massacre Part 3. 3 11-year-old boys rode their bikes into the west side of the parking lot, ready to order ice cream sundaes. Someone yelled at them from across the street, so they hesitated. But it was too late. James saw them and shot the 3 boys with his Uzi and shotgun. Joshua fell to the ground, critically wounded, but he survived. Omar received gunshots to the back and began vomiting on the ground. David was shot several times in the head. Omar and David both died at the scene. An elderly couple, 74-year-old Miguel and 69-year-old Ada, tried walking out the doors. As Miguel reached to open the door for his wife, James shot Ada with a shotgun to the face and wounded Miguel. Miguel cradled his wife in his arms and wiped the blood from her face. He shouted curses at James. James approached Miguel, swore at him, and then killed him with a single shot to the head. After police arrived, James went up to the service counter and adjusted the portable radio to the music station. He then started dancing to the music as he shot more innocent victims. 5:17 p.m., Chuck Foster, a SWAT sniper, fired a single round 35 yards away. He hit James and severed his aorta just beneath his heart. He died immediately. The entire event lasted 77 minutes, and James fired a total of 257 rounds. Killed 21 people. Hi, I'm Cam, and this is the El Paso Walmart shooting. On August 3, 2019, a gunman entered an El Paso Walmart, killing 23 people and injuring 23 more. This act of domestic terrorism has been described as the deadliest attack on Latinos in recent U.S. history. A 23rd victim died after spending 9 months in the hospital. The gunman entered the building at 10:40 a.m. carrying a semi-automatic rifle. 61-year-old Jorge Garcia was shot while raising funds for his granddaughter's soccer team. 90-year-old Luis Suarez was killed and his wife was injured. They had been married for 70 years. 15-year-old Javier Rodriguez, a student at Horizon High School, was shot and killed. 24-year-old Jordan Anchondo was killed while holding a 2-month-old son. A manifesto titled The Inconvenient Truth was published on 8chan 20 minutes before the shooting that revealed the man's name and gun he would use. The manifesto was anti-Hispanic and anti-immigration, promoting white nationalism and far-right ideologies. It also included language similar to what was used by President Donald Trump when he spoke about immigration. The gunman was later identified as 21-year-old Patrick Crucius. Patrick lived in Allen, Texas, 650 miles from El Paso. During his interrogation, Patrick said he was targeting Mexicans. February 6, 2020, Patrick was charged with 90 federal charges.
Places in America where you could get murdered. Number 1, the Texas Killing Fields. The Texas Killing Fields are a stretch of highway and an abandoned oil field near Houston and Galveston, where since the 70s, over 30 people have been found murdered, and none of the murders have been solved. Most of these victims were young girls and they were abducted, went missing, and were found years later dead. And people theorize that there's still an active killer in the area that's targeting women. I actually visited the Killing Fields about 2 months ago, and I went to an area behind a Baptist church where there are 4 crosses, meaning that 4 bodies were found there. Let me tell you, it is eerie out there. Look at this video clip that I took when I was there. Isn't that just eerie? And while we were there, we went ghost hunting near those body dumping sites, so we talked about it in our podcast. So if you want to hear the full story of the Texas Killing Fields, we go through all the victims, all the murder suspects, go listen to my podcast, Murder in America. You can listen to it for free if you have an iPhone, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. It's everywhere. It's episode number 2, the Texas Killing.
You probably recognize this girl. This is 18-year-old Isabella Guzman on trial for the murder of her mother, Yoon-Mi Hoy. Growing up, Isabella had a bad relationship with her mother, who she resented for bringing her up in a poorer household than her friends. On August 28, 2013, Isabella's stepfather called the police when he saw blood pooling under the door of the upstairs bathroom, which Isabella and Yoon-Mi were inside. This was the second time he had called the police that day, the first call coming after Isabella had threatened her mother by saying, "You will pay." By the time the police arrived, it was too late for Yoon-Mi, and Isabella had already fled the scene. She was found the next day, still covered in blood, and it was revealed in Yoon-Mi's autopsy that Isabella had stabbed her mother a total of 79 times in the face and neck. Isabella was denied the death penalty due to reason of insanity, and she is currently in a mental institute. She claims that she suffered years of abuse at the hands of her family, but there are no current plans for her release.
Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the horrific case of Junko Furuta. Junko was a beautiful, popular 16-year-old Japanese high school girl. There was another teenager, his name was Hiroshi, and he allegedly had ties to the Yakuza, or like the Japanese mafia basically, and he had a crush on Junko. But Junko turned him down, which is not something that he was used to, and it would also prove to be a fatal choice for her to make. On November 25th of 1988, Junko was kidnapped by 4 older teenage boys, one of them being Hiroshi. The first thing they did was have her call her parents and tell them that she had run away. They took her to one of the boys' parents' houses, so the parents knew what was happening to Junko the entire time, but they were afraid of these teenage boys, so they didn't tell anyone. I'm not sure if I said it, but all of this happened in Tokyo, by the way. Trigger warning, this is about to get rough. Junko was tortured for the next 44 days in unimaginable ways, including extreme humiliation. She was kept unclothed. She was sexually assaulted at least 500 times. She was physically beaten with golf clubs against cement floors. She was forced to consume her own feces and bugs. She was kept in a freezer at one point. She had dumbbells dropped on her stomach so hard that at one point she lost control of her bowels. And when she attempted to call the police and they found out, her feet were set on fire. After 20 days of this, she couldn't walk anymore because her bones were shattered. After 30 days of this, she couldn't go to the bathroom anymore due to the extreme damage to her genitals. And her brain size was actually reduced due to the trauma that she'd endured. On day 44, January 4th of 1989, she was challenged to a game of mahjong by her captors. She won, and this pissed them off. They set her on fire, and this caused her body to just go into shock. She didn't have anything left in her to fight with, and she passed away. Her killers placed her body into a 55-gallon drum and disposed of it. All 4 of her murderers were caught, and they did go to trial. And they were tried as adults, but the court also withheld their identities from the public due to their ages at the time. 3 of the 4 boys served less than 8 years in prison. 1 of them served 20. Right now, they are all less than 50 years old, and they are all free men.